your sensory experience is much more attuned. So noise, color, sound, feeling, you're kind of just like more open to all of those experiences. And then microdosing, which is very subtle, is meant to be subperceptual. So you do not experience hallucination.
Welcome to another episode of the Matter Over Mind Experience. I'm your host, master trainer, and weight management expert, Narado Zico Powell. And I have today Corey Sue Morris, founder and CEO of Retreat Microdose. So we're mainly going to talk about psychedelics today. So you're gonna love this episode, right? Because we're getting into some really awesome space with this one. And of course, there's going to be a hack of the episode. Your boy's not going to leave you hanging. We're going to talk about the benefits of microdosing. And then we got a whole lot to cover. And with that being said, Corey Sue, welcome to the show.
Hi, Zico. It's nice to meet you. I'm so excited to spend time together. Got Howard the dog here as well, joining the podcast, just casual third party, but very, very excited to chat. I've been loving the podcast. So thanks for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And with that being said, tell my audience about yourself.
So I am a serial entrepreneur. I live in New York City with the dog and the husband. I'm on my fourth company, which is in the psychedelic space. And I've always been really, probably much like you, passionate about personal growth and self-improvement and how I can, optimize and thrive. And so I found my way to psychedelic medicine as a new tool or a new to me tool for kind of helping up level. So my company is called Retreat. It's a platform for content, community, and concierge medicine for psychedelic newcomers. So we teach people who are curious about psychedelics how to use them in a responsible, data-driven, outcome-driven manner for psychedelics have a number of benefits, which we can talk about. But yeah, so we're a telehealth platform that's helping people thrive with psychedelics.
So the first question that comes to my mind is, because some people are listening to this or watching this are saying, what the heck are psychedelics?
Okay, yeah, that's a big one. And so, psychedelics are a category of drugs that are mind altering. They're big in the 70s, 60s, LSD, mushrooms, ketamine. There are a number of psychedelic drugs, many of which are still illegal, but rapidly changing. And there's really been a psychedelic renaissance in the last 10 years because there's been a lot of data and scientific research that's come out about the benefits of psychedelic medicine for mental health. So if you read the news, you've probably seen a lot of splashy headlines: treatment-resistant depression, PTSD, alcohol use disorder. Psychedelic medicine, when used properly, can actually help people solve a number of the health challenges that are quite severe that we have in the United States today. So what Retreat does, what's personally really interesting to me is psychedelic mushrooms, because they're all natural, right? So if you're on antidepressants or very synthetic. But for me, I found my way to mushrooms because I was looking for natural, plant-based, mushroom-based alternatives for things like anxiety, depression. And so we teach people how to use mushrooms specifically for health outcomes.
So you said some really interesting things there. And one of my first questions is, why is it that psychedelics has really gotten a bad rep up till now, that we're kind of moving? A lot of health experts have seen that are moving more into the space.
Yeah, politics, right? So I am, not a politician and not a doctor. I'm an entrepreneur, but I have amazing doctors and lawyers on my team helping build this business. But in the 60s, and so back up. Talking about mushrooms specifically, I'll give you a quick story. So the psychedelic mushrooms have been used across civilizations for thousands and thousands of years. You look at the Vikings in Europe, they used mushrooms. You look at the Shipibo culture in Peru, they use ayahuasca. You look at Oaxacan healers in Mexico, they've been using mushrooms for thousands and thousands of years. So around the world, aside from our sort of like narrow part of history in the last 100 years in the United States, psychedelics have been used across cultures as a healing modality. In the 1950s, there was an American man that went down to Mexico, R. Gordon Wasson and his wife Valentina, and this is a well-known psychedelic story. And they met a woman named Maria Sabina, who was a curandera, which is basically like a female healer in the community, kind of a grandmotherly type that was known for healing the community. And they would do these mushroom ceremonies in their homes at night. And the local healers would take people in the community that were struggling through a guided mushroom ceremony. And this American man in the 1950s brought the mushrooms back to the United States. And that's when sort of psychedelic mushrooms arrived. And they weren't illegal in the 50s and the 60s. And research kind of started happening on the benefits of LSD and psilocybin. But then Richard Nixon got elected, and he really used psychedelics as a way to kind of suppress the counterculture movement around the Vietnam War. So psychedelics were legal from the 1950s to 1970, 71, when Richard Nixon put in the Controlled Substances Act that outlawed psychedelics. And there's a lot of conversation. There's a really good Vice article on this that describes it better than I do. But like Nixon really wanted to suppress both counterculture Vietnam protesters, basically. And he goes on the record talking about this. So and then research kind of went underground, and people use them, for recreation. And then kind of in the last 10 to 15 years, a number of universities, Johns Hopkins, Harvard, Columbia, have been doing research because we're in a mental health crisis. So we're looking at alternative, medicines, both from a political, scientific, and cultural kind of thing. So we've seen a lot of change happen in the last 5-10 years.
So, and I know a lot of people are thinking this, especially who are just learning about psychedelics, right?
Yeah.
And of course, we know nothing is 100% safe. We're not diagnosing you. We're not saying you should or shouldn't do something specifically. Please speak to your medical professional before you make any changes. Please be very mindful of that. But
yeah.
The next question I have for you then is the possible dangers of psychedelics. Like, what do you see that someone could say, is this stuff safe, or is it more of it could be safe if not overused? Like, what thoughts do you have around that?
Yeah. And again, I'm not a medical professional. I'm just somebody that I come from a journalism background. I read a lot, do a lot of research. But so there's actually a really interesting study I'll speak to. There's a study that came out of the United Kingdom in the early 2000s by a man called David Nutt. And you can look this up. It's called you Google David Nutt harm study. And in this study, he ranked drugs on a basis of harm, like certain characteristics: harm to self, harm to others. So harm to self, could you get, liver disease, cancer? Could you crash your car? Harm to others, would you get in a fight with your loved one? Would you get in a car and crash it, kind of thing? And so they ranked all the drugs out there. Can you guess what the most harmful drug might have been?
I have no idea.
Alcohol.
And
followed by heroin. And they rank things on a scale, I think, of like 0 to 100. And heroin and alcohol were up there, and the least harmful drug was mushrooms. So it was a 2 on a scale of 0 to 100 in terms of harm. So the nice thing about mushrooms is they're not addictive. They're natural. They occur in nature. You can go forage for mushrooms if you live in the Pacific Northwest, right? These things grow out of the ground. So in terms of, fear of addiction, there's very little, which I think most things are addictive. Sugar is addictive, right? Alcohol is addictive, and it's wild that mushrooms are not, for the most part. Like, you can enjoy doing them and want to do them again, but from a physiological perspective, they're non-addictive, which I think is one of the only substances out there that are not. So.
And then when we're thinking about psychedelics versus, let's say, we're thinking about alcohol, or we're thinking about like drugs or something like that, there's a lot more human involvement, right? In making them into addictive substances, right? So we have to also consider that? It sounds like you have something, look like you have something on your mind there.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say one of the big problems. Sorry, I canceled my Slack. I don't know why it's beeping. I'm logged out. Let me make sure I'm logged out and get the dog out of the break. 1 second, so you're not. So mushrooms have been used recreationally. They've been used spiritually for thousands of years. They've been used recreationally a lot, gaining in popularity. And to your point around the safety, one of the hardest things about mushrooms not being legal or psychedelics not being legal is just the safety of the source, right? So, it's always good to test if you're doing something like that. Recommend testing your mushrooms, but that's the other thing. If somebody hands you a bag of mushrooms versus a powder, it's not, powders can be laced with things. You eat a mushroom out of the ground, it's not going to get laced with anything. So that feels a little like dodgier, but it's a changing regulatory landscape, which is really exciting. There are 2 states in the United States that legalized mushrooms for health reasons this year, Oregon and Colorado, and there are 20 states with legislative bills in session this year to change the regulations around mushrooms specifically, because these plant medicines have benefits for health and have been used by cultures for so long.
So my next question is completely hypothetical, right? Because we're talking about the regulation being changed. So what do you assume is going to happen going forward? Do you see where you think that it's going to eventually be legalized in most states, if not all?
I'm optimistic, right? I'm building a business on the space, right? And it's a legal business. We provide the mental health services for people that are curious about using psychedelic medicine, but our hope is that we'll be able to serve medicine along with therapy in a number of states. And you look at cannabis as an example, and it took 10, 15 years. What's exciting about psychedelics is there's a lot more research in terms of the benefits for more severe medical issues. And so I think the psychedelic wave, as they call it, of regulatory change will move much more quickly than cannabis. There's a lot of cohesion in terms of there was just a pack that was pushed together or brought together. There's a lot of funding that it's behind the legalization, and then you also have the well-trodden path. So for the reasons of it's been done once before with cannabis, there's a lot more research behind the benefits of psychedelics that validate that. There's a lot of like money and elbow grease there, and then you also have cross political aisle support because psychedelic mushrooms have been really beneficial for veterans. So, that's kind of a universal, whether you're red or blue. And I'm by no means a politician, but I love our veterans. And so, and there are a lot of veterans that have spoken out about the benefits of psychedelic medicine for veteran PTSD. There's a really great podcast on the New York Times. If you're a listener to that podcast that talks about this and interviews a lot of veterans, and there's studies that validate that.
So with your business with psychedelics, I know it's legal what you do. So how do you approach this then? Because you said it's kind of not legal in every state. So so someone who's interested in psychedelics, do they have to be in a state where it's legal, or how does that really work?
So we're a coaching and therapy platform. So we help people who are already using mushrooms or curious about using mushrooms with a digital, kind of like this. We match you with a coach and a therapist. If someone was curious about using mushrooms for mental health, we would help you learn how to do that. It falls under the category of harm reduction, right? So we have doctors and therapists and health coaches on our team to help people learn how to use them safely, but we don't provide the product.
No, that's great, because that's really where I wanted to get with my listeners or my viewers, kind of understand where we're going with this. So it doesn't sound like you're just like, okay, let me just sell you some psychedelics, because you don't provide a product itself. However, you match people with coaching to help them safely apply the product, which we're going to talk about microdosing in a moment when we kind of really get into that topic, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Psychedelics are really different, right? Because you need, with anything, which you can probably talk about, weight loss, habit change, flossing your teeth, it's often really helpful to have an accountability partner. And that's even more important when you're working with psychedelic medicine, because what psychedelics do is they open us up, our minds and our hearts, and they uncover a lot of things, which is why it's really helpful for trauma, PTSD, things of that nature. And so you need to be working with a mental health professional or someone with psychedelic experience to guide you towards growth. It's not something you want to go through alone. Like, you don't want to, take mushrooms, have this revelatory experience, and then not know what to do. Right. So it really helps to have a mental health professional to guide you along.
So before we get into microdosing, I have one last question that I'm sure is on my viewers and my listeners' mind is, what is the experience like? Because my understanding is that these are mind altering, right? So for someone who, let's say, are going to start thinking about taking psychedelics, what's the experience really like? Is it like an outer body experience where you're floating in the sky somewhere, or,
Well, that's the other thing, right? Like, our bodies are so personal, and it depends on dosage, right? It's very similar, it's not at all like alcohol, but alcohol, right? You have a half a glass of something and you're a buzz and happy, and some people get angry, some people, so we're all really different. And there's different dosages, right? So put very broadly, loosely on different dosage of psychedelic mushrooms. If you were to do what is called a macro dose, a heroic journey, you would see a lot of visuals, kaleidoscopes, different colors, kind of like the painting in the back of me. So like, what happens is psychedelic mushrooms change the blood flow in certain areas of your brain, and they open up the neural pathways. So you will see all sorts of different colors. You might see things like hallucinations that don't exist. You go on what is kind of like that classic swirly, colorful trip. And what is loosely happening in your brain is that your, brain is firing, there's blood flow going, and it also switches, like adjusts your serotonin levels. So you'll feel much more joyful after the fact. That's like on a lot. If you just take a small medium dose, you might want to go with something that's like, it's great to go for a hike, right? Just like a little bit, even the colors might be brighter. You're in tune to set your sensory experience is much more attuned. So noise, color, sound, feeling, you're kind of just like more open to all of those experiences. And then microdosing, which is very subtle, is meant to be subperceptual. So you do not experience hallucinations. You can go about your day-to-day life if you're microdosing correctly, and it's actually the proper dose for your individual self that you're, like, I'm microdosing right now. You like can't, I'm actually not, but you can't tell the difference. So it's like, Corey yesterday is the same, like no one is aware that I'm microdosing, because it just kind of, what that does is it opens up your creativity and you kind of get in the flow state. So a similar analogy would be CBD, right? If you smoke cannabis, you have different things happen, but CBD has a lot of health benefits for inflammation and calm, and you don't have any kind of perceptual life personality changes. That makes sense.
That makes sense. And I love the fact that you're making that comparison, because like say with microdosing, you can go about your day to day. So you today will be basically the same person tomorrow, versus if I'm drunk, you're gonna definitely tell the difference. I mean, you think I'm crazy on this podcast, put some liquor in me and it's a whole different show.
Right. And that's the thing, right? This is like, I'm, always consult with your mental health professional, your doctor, etc. But this is why it is really helpful to speak with a doctor or a therapist about sort of any medications that you're on, any counterindications, health experiences in your history kind of thing. It's very unlikely that like anything would happen, but it's just better safe than sorry, right? Like my goal is to help people thrive, not to cause harm. And so I have to, I want to be very mindful of the fact that like it is broadly speaking very unlikely that you will hallucinate, that you will have harm. If anything, you're going to like feel more creative, enhance your flow state, improve your heart rate variability. Like there's all these benefits, but because it's new, because the regulatory landscape is changing, it really requires an expert, right? Like my dosage for a microdose, it ranges from 0.1 to 0.5 grams. I can do 0.5, but someone else might feel like warm and fuzzy than they want to feel at 0.5, and someone else might need 0.1, and it's not related to weight, which is really fascinating as well. So
yes, having that guidance is absolutely important and can really help someone, because I think a lot of times when we do stuff we overdo it quite too. So not only we're doing it in like rations or microdosing, but having an expert who understands what microdosing looks like for you. And it seems like from what you're saying, you also balance it with training and mental health and so it becomes a complete experience and not just I'm just gonna take these to exit life or something, or
Yeah,
and just
exactly.
try to get into our own little world. So that's really powerful, and I love that. And another caveat I'm gonna say, we've talked about the possible benefits. Remember, these are possible benefits, and like Corey said, it's important to talk to a medical professional because we want to make sure that we do this safely and not say, hey, just go out there and get some psychedelics and go on. So just just want to make sure we reiterate that. Now
And
we're going to talk about micro. Oh, go ahead, Corey.
one thing about the medical professional piece is that like you can talk to your doctor. Like you're not going to get in trouble by talking to your doctor about mushrooms, right? Like there are a lot of doctors that are getting a lot more questions, and it's interesting. I have friends and advisors in the company who are a lot of like mental health professionals and doctors, and people are starting to ask them these questions, right? Because there were people across the United States are seeing on CNN the benefits of psychedelic medicine, and they're, oh my gosh, I have depression. I wanted to do that too, right? So you're not going to get in trouble if you ask your doctor, about mushrooms and whether you have counterindications, right? So I think that's the thing. We're also frightened because it was like, oh, that was bad because the government said it was bad, and like there are a lot of things that are bad for us that the government says are okay, like sugar, for instance, or a lot of pharmaceuticals. So.
You don't want to get me started on this because I would never stop. I've always said people like there are so many, like there are people who eat like bread in America, right? And they'll go to another country and eat bread and they don't get the same feeling, right?
I'm that person. I have this running joke. I only eat bread in Europe because I die. Like I literally, my whole body becomes inflamed and I have to lay down for 5 hours if I look at a piece of bread in this country.
Yep. It's because of how it's made. Like is there even like vegetable oil? Like I'm a big fan of eliminating vegetable oil from your diet.
Seed oil,
But the vegetable oil and seed oils are in America are different than seed oils in other countries. Like it's completely insane how like my mother used to sell Mary Kay, and years later I learned that there are over 100 chemicals in American Mary Kay that's banned in Europe.
Yep.
Right. BPA, now everything in America is BPA free. I think Canada and some other country, they just ban BPA altogether. So they don't have to say BPA free because automatically you get plastic, it's going to be BPA free, So yeah, that's something that I can talk about forever and forever and forever.
You and me both. We should have a sidebar one day and we can just talk about all of that. But that's the same thing, right? Like I have the BPA free pans, and it makes me so frustrated. Particularly on the skincare, right? It's just if we market, this scarcity mindset around age and women passing their prime, and then we market them all this skincare that basically poisons us. You know what I mean? It's like, you're not young enough, you're not pretty enough, you need this, you need that, you need this, and then it's filled with chemicals. It sets my, seat on fire. So
yeah, my seat is always on fire. I mean, I'm young and pretty, but hey, that's just my opinion, right? So
you are young and pretty, but and probably because you don't have chemicals in your skincare. So
that's true. All this is natural, people. All this is natural. But we're gonna we talked a lot about already, and we covered a whole lot, even some questions I wasn't even planning on asking. And we're gonna go into microdosing a little bit more so people really have a really solid understanding. But before I talk about that, I want to talk about one of the companies that I partner with, which is the Amino Co. Right? See, Heal, which is one of my favorite products, is 100% science-backed essential amino acid formulation designed to reduce recovery times and improve physical function by accelerating muscle repair by helping you maintain a healthy inflammatory response. We just talked about inflammation just a while ago, right? So Heal it has a particular blend of essential aminos along with creatine and whey protein concentrate. And that particular blend altogether gives your body a lot of good nutrients that helps you to heal. Like when we talk about people have low protein diet, what protein breaks down to what? Aminos and creatine. They have a lot of helpful benefits for your body. So for someone like myself, because your boy goes hard in the paint, and I train like 6, 7 days a week. I drink Heal daily. In fact, I use it as an intro workout. When I'm about 45 minutes or so into my workout, I drink Heal to help me to bang through the second half of my workout. And because I'm training at that time and I'm drinking at that time, my body can use it basically right at the time of that workout. In fact, it was originally designed for NASA astronauts to help them to maintain muscle mass in space. So it's not even just when you're working out, you can drink Heal. You can also drink it. Let's say you've had an injury or you've been inactive for a while. The blends are absolutely, I love them. I love them. Actually, I drink them daily. One of my non-things I love about the Amino Co is they have all natural flavors, which is important because we see a lot of essential aminos out there that has artificial flavoring and all that stuff, right? But they have flavors that are all natural, which I believe stevia is the sweetener, right? So they have that as well. So that's something that I love about the product. But check it out. The website is aminoco.com/ZecoHealth, which gives you 30% off Heal and also Perform. If you've been watching me, listening to me for a while, you know I love to talk about Perform as well, which I use basically as like a intro. I'm not, it's more like a pre-workout, and then I use Heal as my intro or even post-workout sometimes. But the website's going to be in the description of the podcast, so you can click on there and save your 30%. And with that being said, let's talk a little bit more, Corey, about microdosing, because as we talked about, okay, giving people a little bit of what they should need. But for someone who may still be a little bit unclear on what is microdosing, or even what should their experiences be like when they're microdosing?
Yeah. So broadly speaking, microdosing is the act of taking small subperceptual doses of a substance. It's typically LSD, or in our case, mushrooms, right? Like what I'm referring to. And what's really growing in popularity from, Silicon Valley bros to moms who mushroom, there's a trend is microdosing mushrooms for personal growth outcomes. And so microdosing is 0.1 to 0.5 of a gram of mushrooms typically. And the type of mushrooms are psilocybin mushrooms, which are known as magic mushrooms, hallucinogenic mushrooms. And the reason people microdose, there are a number of them. They're largely related to mental health. And microdosers report improved focus, getting into flow state more frequently, enhanced creativity, improved fitness levels. Let's see what else. Greater joy and happiness. There's a number of benefits of microdosing, and it kind of varies by person, but broadly, it's because at a macro level, psilocybin does two things. It opens up neural pathways in your brain to gets your brain firing, and then it has a positive effect on our serotonin levels, which is obviously tied to mood and joy.
So when I'm hearing positive effect on your serotonin levels, I'm also hearing like a connection with your gut health, right? Because we know that's where most of your serotonin is created. So that sounds really important. And then, so I guess my next step, because we're talking about, be more creative, fitness levels, and so on and so forth, right? Now, we thought we use the term mental health, right? So when your mental health improves, that those things usually tend to follow with it. But when we're just saying mental health, what do you really mean? Like, is it like if and again, these are all not, everybody's not going to experience the same situation or the same thing. But when we talk about improving mental health, like, are we saying that it's possible that this someone may deal with stress better, may not have less stress in their lives, but may deal with stress better, may just feel better, like smile more, or maybe be in a more parasympathetic state? Like, are those kind of where you're going with this?
Yeah, I think a couple things. One thing on your serotonin comment, there is a very nascent but up field that I'm really excited about, which is the connection between psychedelics and the microbiome, right? Because there hasn't been enough research on either, but there's such exciting opportunities for mental and physical health, right? So there are researchers starting to study specifically the benefits on psychedelics on the microbiome, because as you said, 80% of serotonin is in our gut. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm A/B testing is something my microbiome. So I just got my microbiome tested, and then I'm going to go through a couple of like microdosing regimens and then test it at the end and see what happens. So love a little growth hacking. But yes, so on mood, absolutely. I mean, anecdotally, microdosers report improved mood. Personally, I have, adjusted my mood and my stress levels with microdosing. And that's something that people speak about quite often. And there is, and another area that I don't really feel comfortable wading into, but there's a burgeoning kind of conversation around, there are a lot of people that are seeking microdosing as a tool to taper off of antidepressants. Again, I am not a doctor, and if you are on antidepressants, you should talk to your doctor and your therapist, but I just know that there are a lot of people that are seeking to, get off of pharmaceuticals and specifically antidepressants. And there's a lot of conversation in the field happening about, being able to use microdosing as an alternative. So
That's all very interesting. And thank you so much for sharing everything that you shared. I mean, we haven't even scratched the surface. One of the things I love about what I do is that, especially when we talk about the science behind it, there's always new things, right, to learn.
yeah.
And I know that when I have you on, maybe next year or whenever we talk about part 2, we're gonna have some more stuff to talk about that we didn't even know before. So this is a very exciting feel and lots happening. So thank you so much for sharing everything you shared. My last thing I'm going to ask you is, this is your time to tell my audience, how can they learn about you? How can they learn about your work? Do you have a website? So on and so forth.
Yeah. So we got into like the nitty gritty stuff. I feel like I've got my microdosing tips and protocols and help and all of that. So you can go over to retreatmicrodose.com. So retreat, like a yoga retreat, RETREAT, microdose.com. And we have a free microdosing guide that you can download to get information on proper dosage, tips and tricks, considerations. We also have a full media site where we have amazing articles like, can microdosing help PMS? Turns out it can. Can microdosing improve your creativity? So we really break down a lot of these themes in science sort of backed articles on our website. And then we also have a free community for people who are looking to learn more about psychedelics and sort of peer-to-peer conversations. It's a free invite only kind of private space for psychedelic curious folks who are looking to grow, to have meaningful conversations. So that can all be found on retreatmicrodose.com. And we're also on Instagram at retreatmicrodose.
Perfect. And of course, because, I'm such a nice guy. Maybe I'm microdosing. Who knows, right? I'm being nice today. But the show notes are going to be zikahealth.com/retreat microdose. And then I'll make sure that the website is in the show notes as well. And of course, the show notes are going to be in the description of the episodes. You can click on it, learn all the information that you need to know. Now, Corey, normally I say, let's get out of here. Thank everybody for watching, but you kind of got me there because you said you have more to talk about microdosing. So look, I'm putting you on the spot. I'm putting you on the spot because you called me out.
Yeah.
Tell my audience, what more do you have to talk about with microdosing or just psychedelics in general?
I think so. For microdosing at a high level, I think one thing that's really important is you should follow a protocol. So there are a couple of popular protocols, and you microdose on an 8 to 10 week period. And a protocol is basically a schedule and a calendar for which you microdose. So some protocols you do 1 microdose day, 2 days off. That's called the Fadiman protocol. And other days you microdose 4 days out of the week and 3 days off. So you get on a schedule that you repeat for 8 to 10 weeks, and then you take a 1 or 2 month break. So your audience probably knows all sorts of different habits, but what I have really found is that it's kind of awesome to use that time period as a opportunity to drive change. So for me, I have a couple of different things that in addition to microdosing, I, write in my journal so that I can monitor how I'm feeling. I track my mood and I set some goals, right? So like one of them could have been, launch a company, launch a podcast, whatever it is. And so it's a really like amazing catalyst for change, creative project, etc. So I encourage people to add on a few different practices. Journaling and meditation with your microdose in the morning is probably the best thing, and then following a protocol. So I feel like your audience would just be into using microdosing as a catalyst for change. And that's what I think psychedelics are amazing for. And so setting kind of like a bumpers of a time period around, a 2.5 month process. So
I'm gonna add to that too when you microdose to watch the Matter Over Mind experience. Just
yeah, exactly. First things first. So it's like brush your teeth, take your microdose, meditate, write in your journal, watch the Mind Over Matter experience. Like, that's the
right.
morning routine.
The Matter Over Mind, the
Matter over mind
experience, the
I know. Matter over mind.
That's right. That's right. I have a whole story behind that where we can talk about that behind the scenes. But with that being said, thank you, Corey, for being here. Love this episode. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And now we're out for the day.
Thank you.